and welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 13. So starting out this week, Steely Resolve, and I've brought this card up a few times. I have this in my Name is One deck. It's a fantastic card if you just want people to keep their hands off your creatures, okay? So 2 mana, 1 and a green, enchantment. As Steely Resolve enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type have Shroud, okay? So there's 2 things of note here. First of all, it seems like a tribal card, right? Because you're choosing a creature type. Anytime you see a card that says choose a creature type, the assumption is it goes in a tribal deck. I mean, yeah, obviously you can put this in a tribal deck and it'll give all that, particularly your elf deck, and it'll give all your elves Shroud, which can be really good. However, there's a lot of different ways to use it. Now, obviously, the tricky part here is that it gives Shroud, and as everybody knows from playing Lightning Greaves, that can get tricky because then you can't target your own creature. I like Shroud. I don't like that they got rid of it. It's a fair version of Hexproof. I think Hexproof is the more unfair version where I get to cast a bunch of stuff on my creatures and nobody else does. I think it's more fair if nobody can target that creature. So you probably wouldn't want to play this in a Voltron deck, okay? Because then you can't put your equipment on your whatever creature, right? But if you have a commander that you just want people to keep their hands off of, this is a great one to do it, right? Again, in my Name is One deck, I don't want people exiling my commander, right? Once I get my commander down, I don't want someone to exile it because I need it to die. I mean, I don't need it to die, but I prefer it to die and go to the graveyard. And most exile effects are going to be targeted, right? Board wipes, I'm totally okay with. I also have just lots of beefy spirits, right? So I'm going to name spirits with this in that deck. And those beefy spirits, I just don't want them getting, exiled or really touched at all. I also had this in my Paco and Haldan deck because I think this is perfect in a deck like that where you don't want anyone touching your commander, right? My Paco, I'm going to cast it. It's going to come down. And there is no window there where my opponent can remove my commander or my creature, right? That's what I love about Steely Resolve. It's already in play. It's not like a Lightning Greaves, right? If I put a Lightning Greaves on my commander, I have to play it, then I have to equip it, and as we all know, you can respond, right? You can respond, remove the guy's creature, and then you can't do anything. With Steely Resolve, there's no window there for your opponent to react, right? Your Paco, as an example, right, comes down, and at no point can my opponent cast a Path to Exile on my Paco. It comes down, I go to combat, it has haste so I can attack immediately, and my opponent can't do anything about it, right? Coming in at number 9, Strands of Night. And this is another one I have in my Name is One deck. That purely was an accident. 4 mana enchantment, 2 black, pay 2 life, sacrifice a swamp, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's a really powerful effect. This is repeatable recursion, right? As we all know, Recurrent Nightmare is banned in the format, which is probably the best at doing that. This is an alternative version to that, maybe. The pay 2 black is no big deal at all. The pay 2 life is no big deal at all. Sacrificing a swamp, that can get a little pricey. If you have any kind of a deck like a Lord Windgrace deck or a Gitrog monster deck where you're probably sacrificing lots of lands anyway, then I don't know. Like, this is almost an auto-include in a Gitrog deck, isn't it? I mean, assuming you have creatures in there that you want to get back out of the graveyard because you want to be sacrificing your swamps anyway. I mean, Gitrog is more of a, I don't even know. I can't remember the last time I saw Gitrog in a casual game, so... And I don't know if you want to play this in the CDH version, but the reason I have this in my Name is One deck is because all my lands are going to be swamps because I have an Urborg in play, so I can just sacrifice any land. And also, again, I have lots of big beefy creatures in that deck that I want to get back from the graveyard. But even if you're just playing a mono black deck, later in the game, you have a whole bunch of swamps. You can afford to sacrifice a few, right? I just think this can go in a lot of decks. Coming in at number 8, Stronghold Assassin. 3 mana, 1 black, zombie assassin. 2/1. Tap to sacrifice a creature to destroy target non-black creature. So this is another one that used to get played in Commander a lot back in the day. Got printed in a Commander set. It's originally from Stronghold. Got printed in Commander 2013. And has really disappeared. I just did my 5 creature removal spells in black, and a lot of people were like, oh, Snuff Out, where's Snuff Out? It's free, it's so fantastic. I don't like the non-black. Maybe that's why this card has maybe waned in popularity. Black doesn't have that restriction as much anymore. Black used to always be killing killing non-black creatures, and now they've sort of just completely gotten rid of that. So for me, that's why a card like Snuff Out didn't make my top 5. Even though it's free, the non-black part, like on that video, I commented that the 7 of the top 10 commanders in the format are black, so it's the restriction I don't love. Same with this card. Stronghold Assassin is non-black creature, but man, this is repeatable removal. It's also a sack outlet, okay? So it can go in any sort of an aristocrat's deck. It's also a zombie, right? So you can put this in a zombie deck. If you have some deck that's making zombie tokens or something, you can just sack those tokens to destroy creatures. He can just sacrifice himself to kill another creature. I just think this card, it's completely disappeared. At least I haven't seen it in years, and it is still really, really good. Coming in at number 7, Stronghold Gambit. And this is a funny one. I've never seen this card before, and it just has such a unique effect that I thought I would mention it. 2 mana sorcery, 1 in a red. Each player chooses a card in their hand. Then each player reveals their chosen card. The owner of each creature card revealed this way, with the lowest converted mana cost, puts it onto the battlefield. This is just a very commander card. To me, it reads like a Goblin game and a show and tell sort of combined. A mini Goblin game or a mini show and tell. That's what it really feels like. So if you like cards like that, you might like this. And it even says here, you don't have to choose a creature card, but choosing a non-creature card does nothing except maybe bluff your opponents, right? So obviously, if you don't pick a card, if you're like, oh, I don't have a creature card, so I'm not going to pick anything, then your opponents know you're not going to put anything onto the battlefield. So you might want to pick something just to bluff them, right? You're going to put the lowest CMC. So it's maybe a reverse show and tell. I don't know. In a Goblin deck, though, you're going to have lots of small creatures. So chances are, if you pick a 2, chances are it's going to get onto the battlefield. If you pick a 3, you might even get it onto the battlefield. Just an interesting, unique card. God, there can't be too many cards in a game that do this. It's only 2 mana. And it's fun and interesting if you have, a chaos deck, a hug deck, decks like that might like cards like this, right? Coming in at number 6, Symbiotic Deployment. This is a very unique card. 3 mana enchantment, 2 and a green. Skip your draw step. Ouch. But you pay 1, tap 2 untapped creatures you control to draw a card. There's a lot to talk about here. I mean, obviously, skipping your draw step can be really, really bad, right? But tap 2 untapped creatures you control to draw a card. That's repeatable, obviously, right? So right away, I'm thinking an Amara deck where you want to tap it, right? You tap it. You create a token, and now you have those tokens that you can tap. It's 2 creatures, though. Obviously, if this was only 1 creature, you could just go nuts. It's 2 creatures, so you can't go completely nuts. However, again, in an Amara deck, just as an example, if you have a Parallel Lives, now you're getting 2 tokens, right? I mean, it's a few hoops to jump through, but if you're playing an Amara deck and you got a Parallel Lives or an Anointed Procession, right, you tap it with this ability, it and another creature, you get 2 tokens, then you can tap those 2 tokens, pay 1 mana. The tricky thing with this is if somebody board wipes, now you have no creatures in play and you're skipping your draw step, so you might actually end up locking yourself out. So you got to be careful that way. However, if you have a commander that makes creatures, then you'll be okay, right? So Amara, for example, again, makes creatures, and there's lots of these. There's lots of commanders in green that make creatures, right? Atla, for example, makes egg creature tokens that you can tap to do this. Gred, again, another one. If someone board wipes, you can cast your commander, you get your commander, and you get that Rhino token. So those you can tap to draw a card. If your commander can make tokens, then this card, you don't have to worry about getting locked out like that. I mean, it's a high risk, high reward type of card, right? You can get really screwed with this, or you can go nuts with it. Coming in at number 5, Tariff. 2 mana sorcery. Each player sacrifices the creature they control with the highest converted mana cost unless they pay that creature's mana cost. If 2 or more creatures a player controls are tied for the highest cost, that player chooses one. So this is a merciless executioner, fleshbag marauder type of effect in white, right? Which you don't see a whole lot. This just makes everyone sacrifice a creature, also makes them sacrifice the highest CMC, right? So it's like a Crackling Doom type of effect in mono white. Now they can pay, right? And it includes you, all right? So obviously you just have to plan around this. You plan around it so that either you don't have anything that really matters, like maybe you have a 1-drop, so you pay 1, or you just wait until you have the requisite mana, right? This is just like with Fade Away, right? The card that I mentioned in one of my first 10 cards videos. So you wait till your opponents are tapped out, then you cast it. And they don't even have to be tapped out. Remember, it's the highest converted mana cost. So if your opponent has a 7-drop, they have to have 7 mana open. If they can't pay the 7 mana, If they even have 5 or 6 mana open, that's no good. They have to have 7 because they have to pay its mana cost. So this usually is just going to force all your opponents to sacrifice their best creature. Pretty good card. Coming in at number 4, Telim'Tor's Edict. This is just a very unique card. Again, I like to mention the unique cards, and this is, even though it doesn't look like it at first. So it's 1 red, instant. Exile target permanent you own or control, and you get to draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. So first of all, it's 1 mana, and it's an instant, so you can do it whenever you want, and it replaces itself, right? It's a cantrip. So already, you can just throw this in any deck, and you'll be okay, right? It's not going to be a dead draw ever. You exile target permanent you own or control. So the important words here are exile, first of all, right? Permanent, right? So any permanent. Most importantly, though, own or control. So I had this in my Yasova Dragonclaw deck where I would steal. This is one of the things I would use. Steal your opponent's creature, and then you exile that permanent. You control it, so you can exile it, right? And then you get to draw a card, right? But also it's own. Someone steals your commander and they use blatant thievery or whatever, and you want to get your commander back. You can now pay 1 mana because you own it. You can exile it. It'll go back to the command zone so you can get it back. You can use this in an exchange effect where you exchange with someone. That's another deck that I use this in. You exchange stuff with someone, and then because you just gave them something that you own, you can then exile that thing so they get nothing out of it, right? There's just a lot of ways to use this card. A lot of ways because, again, it is exile, it is a permanent, it is own or control. There's not a lot of cards that do that. Coming in at number 3, Thief of Blood. 6 mana, 4 black, vampire, and it's a 1/1. That's a lot of mana for a 1/1. However, as Thief of Blood enters the battlefield, remove all counters from all permanents. Thief of Blood enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each counter removed this way. So again, this is a Commander card that was printed in Commander 2015. Didn't see a ton of play back then, still doesn't see a ton of play. I briefly had an Alicia deck. I really like this in an Alicia deck because it has only a 1 power, so it comes in and does its effect, and usually you're going to get this big flyer as you cheat it into play. This is destroy all planeswalkers, first of all. Okay, if you have a guy in your play group who has a Super Friends deck, this comes into play and just kills all planeswalkers. It's going to be huge, and it also kills all planeswalkers. It's going to remove all those +1/+1 counters. It's going to remove all those lifelink or indestructible counters because they have those now as well. You got an opponent who's playing a Skullbriar deck. You got a buddy that plays a Cathril deck. There's just a lot of decks that this completely hoses. And then on top of that, you get this giant flyer. Like this guy could be a 20/20, right? So it's niche, sure. And remember, it's a vampire, so you can put this in a vampire deck. And I think it's rare that you're going to play a game where no one's playing any counters at all. I just really don't think that's going to happen often, but also can be super fantastic against certain decks. Coming in at number 2, Teferi's Veil. 2 mana enchantment, 1 and a blue. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it phases out at the end of combat. So this is a card I think I've probably mentioned a couple times. This is just such a fantastic card if you're playing an aggro deck in blue. And maybe that's why you don't see it much, is because blue decks don't usually do an aggro style. I first came across this card, again, early in the day of playing Commander. A guy had it in his Edict deck. How you blow out an Edict deck is you just board wipe. Right? You just board wipe and then they don't have anything, right? They play their little 1/1 flyers and whatever. They attack, they draw a ton of cards. You board wipe, they don't have anything. But if they have this in play, they're going to swing with all their creatures. They're going to draw a ton of cards. Then their creatures are going to phase out at the end of combat. And it's a board wipe protection, right? So if you're playing a deck like that, you can just swing all out. You don't have to worry about board wipes because your creatures keep phasing out. And as an added bonus for the Edric deck, your opponents don't get to use that ability, right? Because your opponents get to use that card draw ability as well. So if you're swinging with your Edric, he phases out at the end of combat and then your opponents can't use it, right? I had a guy in one of my comments section talking about, oh, every time you make a list, I have to redo my Zur deck. Another great card for a Zur deck, right? Zur the Enchanter. Again, you don't want your Zur in play, really, right? You want him phased out when he's only good to you when he's attacking, right? If you have creatures that are only good to you as an attacker, then you don't want them on the battlefield because they're only going to die to a board wipe. They're only going to be a target for removal spells, right? You're never ever going to block with your Zur. You just want to attack with it, then you have it phase out, and you don't have to worry about it getting removed. And finally today, Thran Forge. 3 mana artifact. Pay 2 until end of turn. Target non-artifact creature gets +1/+0 and becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. So we all know how to use this, right? It's to pump your creatures up. You pay 2 mana, give your creature +1/+0. No, of course that's horrible, right? You don't use it that way. You use it on your opponent's creatures, right? You pay 2, you turn your opponent's creature into an artifact. Then you can destroy it with artifact removal spells, right? This is sort of the artifact version of Soul Sculptor, where I talked about Soul Sculptor. You can turn your opponent's creatures into enchantments, destroy them. This is the artifact version, right? So obviously, if you're playing a Glissa Sunseeker deck, this is an auto-include. I don't know if people who have Glissa decks out there already are running this or not, right? Because Glissa is going to be destroying artifacts like crazy. So put it in your Glissa deck, right? You just turn your opponent's creatures into artifacts and then tap your Glissa to destroy them. If you're playing any deck that has lots of artifact removal, this can, this basically just becomes creature removal. Just a very unique effect and a lot of really unique effects on the list today. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.